This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Hi, everybody. Just online and you're listening in on this. We have more people here than we can fit into this room. So what we're going to do is we're going to move upstairs. That might take 5 to 10 minutes. So I apologize for the inconvenience. We will on after that.
Just talk for a minute about the fact that there are multiple records requests that are being ignored by the city. 2 from me and several others by other citizens. It's been more than 10 days, which is the time limit for responding in some way. The request that I made was for an itemized line item budget, rather than the summary budget that Salem has provided, so that we could look at some of the details in the budget as opposed to just the summaries. And it has been more than 10 days and it's inappropriate to not respond at all. It would be great for people to actually have some transparency. The meeting last week was not transparent. People were not able to ask questions. Many of the questions that were asked online were not even addressed. And I think it would be very helpful to really be transparent and not just keep blowing us off. Thank you.
I apologize to anybody online who maybe did not. I didn't realize we were muted. So that's unmuted, so we should be good. Anyone else have anything to say in terms of public speak? Going once, going twice. Okay. Let's talk about education. Walsh, thank you.
All right.
And just as a reminder, yes, yeah, just as a reminder, sort of the format that we've been going through so far is to present the budget with the override and then present it without the override. But if there's any sort of overarching context that you want to lay out beforehand, that's also fine.
Is there one on your desk? Yeah. Needs to lock them up. Excellent. Thank you so much, City Council members. Michelle Balch, Superintendent of Easthampton Public Schools, and I'm joined with Julia Franks.
Can I just jump in? I don't want to. Is it possible that I could make you a co-host on the meeting and you could share your screen to that? Because right now the people online are not going to be able to see that presentation. Sure. So are you on the meeting right now?
Tom, they should be able to see it.
They can't.
They can't see it.
Like, I mean, they can see the screen, but there's no way they can read it.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not going to try to explain it because the mics are full. Agenda. Choose the password.
Oh, on your laptop.
I just asked to join.
Okay, your co-host. Thank you.
All right. All right. That better?
Yes. You did it, guys.
It takes a village. My echoey voice. All right. Thank you so much. Michelle Balch, Superintendent of Easthampton Public Schools, and I'm joined with Julia Franks, our School Business Director. Thank you so much for having us. We are here to present our school department budget. And as always, we like to start with our core values, who we are as a school community. And our core values are centered around learning, equity, belonging, and shared responsibility. We co-created these core values this year as a group of caring and committed educators and community members came up with those. And just a little bit about Easthampton Public Schools at a glance. We have 2 schools. This year we have 1,340 students. Our average class size is 17. Our average student attendance is around 94%. We spend about $17,372 per pupil. We entered the budget conversation. We prepared a level service budget. It was approved by the school committee on March 24th. This year's current appropriation for the school department was $22,794,154. Our initial budget proposal was for $24,969,268.16. That was an increase from this year's budget of 9.54. So we are asked to prepare 2 budget scenarios. Scenario 1 is if the override passes, and scenario 2 is if the override fails. So scenario 1, if the override passes, we would have a decrease of 3.69% from our initial level service ask. And that is a decrease of $922,603.50. So almost $1 million in cuts for a successful override. Scenario 2 is if the override fails, we will have to cut $2,771,418 from our school department budget. This is over an 11% decrease of our budget, our original budget ask. So here is just sort of a breakdown by the school department expenses. We have scenario 1 here and we have scenario 2. So you'll see our original sort of FY26, what we requested for FY27, and again, those same 2 scenarios. So this is what we submit to the mayor based on his ask for us to reduce our level service budget. In this slide, these numbers are by the city ledger. So you are all familiar with, sort of our line item asks as a budget. So scenario 1, you'll see our largest, as a school district, our largest line item is personnel. So the personnel makes up almost 70% of our overall budget. So when we're asked to cut, that is something that we can't not touch, because if you look at the percentages of other sort of line items in our budget, they're relatively small compared to personnel. So you'll see contracted services, intergovernmental as non-net spending, other expenses and supplies. And then the failed override, if you look at our personnel line item, we're at $14,559,604. So if you look at the difference between, sort of the override passing And the failed override, that's like $2 million in personnel that we have to cut from the school district. Just some FTE sort of information. So full-time equivalents staffing from 26 to 27. So here you'll see at Mountain View School, you'll see the current number of full-time staff that we have. The current, we have 168 staff members at MVS. At Easthampton High School, we have 64.5, and at the district, we have 24.8, for a total of 257.3. And then we went with our sort of level service budget. In order for us to get to level services, we did make some cuts. We cut an administrator position, 2 para educator positions, and an educator position. So you'll see those numbers decrease by 4 there for our level service budget. And if the override passes, we're at 247.3. If the override fails, we're at 229.7 staff. So you'll see below it sort of the cuts that were made for the level service. You'll see the cuts that we have to make for successful override, and then the failed override is 24 positions, and we would convert 12 positions. And those position conversions are not the same people, right? It is different people doing different work.
Could you expand on that a little bit, just what that?
Yes, so if a position conversion would look like if we have a registered nurse at Mountain View Elementary, that position would be converted to an LPN position. We would go from library educators to library para educators. So they would be conversions, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of those conversions. And I'm going to turn it over to Julia, Franks, who's going to talk a little bit about circuit breaker, school choice, and how we generate some revenue, and what the number of students that are choicing in and choicing out of Easthampton Public Schools.
Good evening. So our budget is made up of 3 components. There's our general fund budget, which is the city appropriation. We have planned offsets to the general fund budget that come from circuit breaker and school choice, right? So those are 2 pots of money that we use to support our general fund budget, to provide services to our students and to pay for things like busing. So I figured it would be important to talk a little bit about circuit breaker and provide you for some history. So circuit breaker is a reimbursement program from the state. We file a claim at the end of each fiscal year based on our extraordinary special education expenses. They reimburse us a portion of those expenses in the following fiscal year. We can use those funds in the year they give it to us or the following year. So we are able to carry over circuit breaker revenue for 1 year. So I wanted to show sort of what our circuit breaker history has looked like over the past couple of years. So start in FY22. We had about $400,000 in circuit breaker, brought in $382,000 of revenue, and had $770,000 of expenses. So some years, like if we have a student that moves in the middle of the school year that we need to provide services to, the point of that circuit breaker revenue is that it's essentially a stabilization fund that we can go to fund extraordinary and unanticipated expenses. So there's revenue that comes in, but we tend to spend that revenue in the same year. So for the past 5 or so fiscal years, at the end of the year, there's been anywhere from $180,000 to $100,000 sitting in there. So it's not a big pot of money, but it's enough money that sits there that if we have a new placement and out of it, so that we have a little bit of breathing room if there's an unanticipated expense. The other thing is we plan to use circuit breaker revenue. So we plan in our budget for $800,000 worth of out of district tuition to come from that revenue. And we plan for $300,000 of out of special education transportation. So this year and last year, we have planned in our budget $1.2 million of expenses. Right, so we see those numbers in there for 26, and for 27, that number is $920,000. So as long as that revenue comes in that we anticipate, right, we have that little bit of cushion in there. But so for FY27, those expenses, right, is that planned offset that we have for tuition and transportation. So for FY27, it's $800,000 for special education tuition and $120,000 for special education transportation. So those are expenses that are not carried in our general fund budget because we anticipate this revenue based on this year's expenses and claims and the reimbursement we receive next year. The other sort of pool of money that school districts tend to have is school choice revenue. Right? You can see in FY22, right, we had over $1.5 million at the end of the year sitting in school choice revenue. Right? Prior mayors and prior business managers looked at that number and said that that number is kind of high, much like sort of other city stabilization accounts. They said, let's spend down some of that money. So over the past several years, we've been spending down that school choice balance. This year, right, there is $500,000 as an offset to teacher salaries, and there is a $300,000 offset planned for transportation. Okay. So same thing you'll see in FY27. So there's $800,000 of our expenses that we know about that is not in the general fund because we're planning on taking that out of school choice. What we see though is that at the end of FY27, we will have essentially exhausted that pool of money. So we know that our FY28 budget ask is going to go up because we no longer have this amount of money to support that, right? In priors, so in FY25, we funded $750,000 of teacher salaries and $300,000 of transportation and $150,000 of utilities expenses. Okay, so we were asked to spend down those reserves, and we're getting to that point where we have now spent down those reserves. So that's something that we will want to keep in mind moving forward. A little bit of context. So in this chart, we see school choice in. So the number of students that are coming from communities that are not Easthampton and are choosing to come to Easthampton Public Schools, right? That number is not a free-for-all, right? We have to accept students and open up slots, right? The past couple of years, we haven't been opening up a lot of additional slots because we've been focusing on providing services to Easthampton residents. We can bring in other students, but it might increase class sizes. So that's a conversation that happens annually with the school committee, deciding whether or not to open up school choice seats. The next column is students that are leaving Easthampton. So these are Easthampton residents that are choosing to attend schools in communities outside of Easthampton. The FY22 numbers sort of show what happened when we opened MVS school, that we brought about 20 families or 20 students back to Easthampton when we opened up that new school and had new facilities and had new programs. We've held pretty steady since 2023 with the number of students that are choosing to move students out of Easthampton. And one thing that we're concerned about with the override is that if we lose programs, if we lose activities, if we lose things, right, that students choose to come here for, some of those students may longer choose to come to Easthampton. And again, if that school choice revenue decreases, the ability to offset those portions of our budget. So if we lose a lot of students because of the override, the offset that we have planned in our budget may not happen. That revenue might not come in, and we might be starting FY27 in the hole, right? And that's just a thing to keep in mind. The last column there is charter school enrollment. And so the charter school assessment doesn't impact the school department budget, but it impacts the revenue on the city side, right? It is an assessment that comes through on the cherry sheet and is an assessment that is on the monthly local aid payment. I don't know where the numbers are coming from, but the state is already estimating an additional 10 students from Easthampton enrolling in charter schools for next year. So you see that the charter school assessment numbers go up, even sometimes when the student numbers don't, because that assessment figure is based on the per pupil spending in each community. Right? So when budgets change, when per pupil spending changes, the charter school assessment changes as well.
Thank you, Julia. And we had reviewed sort of these slides last night, but I'd like to discuss with you all sort of what a successful override looks like to the school department and versus the failed override. So the first set of slides we'll walk through are the successful override. We'll talk about staffing, programs and activities, and district programs and services. And then we'll talk about the failed override, the staffing, programs and activities, and district programs and services. So if there is a successful override for staffing for the schools at Mountain View, we'll still have to make some cuts. We'd have to cut an elementary classroom position, a special education teacher position, and a registered nurse position. At Easthampton High School, a successful override would eliminate or reduce a world language by 0.5, an English teacher 1.5, and a special education teacher position. The 0.5 isn't a half-time employee. It is somebody who's sort of what we'd call splits their caseload. So they teach some of one thing and some of another, but they have a full caseload of teaching. But it would be like a reduction in that world language offering. But as you can see, sort of, we are able to maintain sort of most of our staff through a successful override. A successful override also allows us to continue to fund middle and high school athletics. During the 25-26 school year, we had 180 students participate in fall athletics, 91 in winter, and 156 are anticipated to play sports in the spring. And we'd have to make some adjustments. At the high school, we'd have to eliminate sort of these team leader stipends. So we have educators that provide professional development and act sort of as department leads. We'd have to eliminate those stipends. We have to eliminate a couple of clubs, 1 or 2 clubs, and that would be based on enrollment. So student participation, we'd survey students, and then we would make the decision based on, the lowest number of expected participation. We went through every line item in our budget. We cut supplies when we could. We cut professional development. We limited summer school options. So typically we do course and attendance recovery programs. We'd have to shorten those just because we have to tighten where we can. At Mountain View, we've reduced the following positions. Same thing at Mountain View. So instead of like departments, they have grade level team leaders who provide sort of the grade level support, the professional development. We'd have to eliminate those stipends. We'd have to eliminate clubs as well at Mountain View. And again, we went through the budget, and anywhere where we could cut supplies, professional development, we offer a garden stipend. We'd have to eliminate that. And we would reduce any and all book curriculum purchases. And sort of our thinking behind that is, the least sort of the furthest away from the classroom that we can cut, we would. And we will actively pursue any and all grants to not to fund positions, but to purchase the supplies and the professional development support services. So we do a really great job in this district of going out and seeking any grant opportunities. Julianne Levin, our assistant superintendent, that is one of her biggest buckets of work. So she is phenomenal, and she has gotten this district so much money through curriculum and grants. Successful override for the district. We would still be able, so we've presented a lot of work around transforming the middle schools, because when I entered sort of the superintendency and talking to families and talking to the community, some of the middle school concerns, and we worked really closely with our student council, our school council at Mountain View, to think about how can we transform the middle school experience, because it's such a pivotal time for our young people. And we came up with a plan to transform the middle school experience, and that would be adding a world language teacher. I heard from many community members that they're choosing to go to different districts because we don't offer things like world language in the middle school. So we had a plan to the successful override will allow us to teach a world language. Band and chorus would be scheduled classes in the middle school, so students would have choice whether they wanted to participate in band or music. We'd have 2 STEAM teachers instead of just 1. We have a phenomenal STEAM teacher who's sort of, it's a pre-K to 8 building, so she's trying to cover as many grades as possible, but we'd have an elementary STEAM teacher And we'd have a dedicated middle school STEAM teacher. And we created these Compass Core courses, and we're really proud of this work. And that includes things like digital literacy, financial literacy, and civics media literacy as a new core for kids, because we listened to them too, that we said, you know, what do you want to learn about? We had a student summit. We listened to them. We listened to the community. We listened to educators. And these were the emerging themes. Students who are students need these skills in order to graduate college and career ready. They need these skills. So we design these courses and continue to design these courses, and a successful override will allow us to do that. But we'll have to make some cuts elsewhere. We'd have to eliminate the after school bus as sort of part of my work as the superintendent. Yeah.
Councilor Jenna was a question.
Can you tell me what STEAM is? I think it's STEM, but they've added another
So
letter.
the art is in it. So
okay.
science, technology, engineering, art, and math.
Perfect. I was like, I know, I'm sure it's related to STEM, but I'm
Yeah.
not sure. Okay, got it.
Yeah. And some of the cuts that we make at the district level, right, in order to get these things that we need, we need for kids, we have to make concessions. So the after school clubs, NISIP coaching, I'm part of new superintendent induction program, that would be eliminated. Laptops for staff. So we have, we wouldn't be purchasing any new laptops for staff. We have a great tech department who cobbles together computers, and we'd have some cobbled together computers for staff. We anticipated doing a policy project with the school committee. We would put that on hold. We reduced any and all software. We looked at it. Do we need this? Do we want this? And if it wasn't a need this, we cut it. We have wireless access points at the high school, so it's how the devices connect. They're at the end of life. The high school is a little over 10 years old. They're reaching the end of life. Sometimes you can't connect to the internet, but we're putting that on hold. We belong to the collaborative. We would cancel our collaborative membership. We would reduce, again, textbooks, curriculum purchases. We reduce those contracted services. We do work with a lot of professional development providers. We cut that. We reduce tutoring, supplies, and network maintenance. But we still get, some really good options for students, and we can secure a lot of our staffing. The failed override.
Real quick
Yeah.
before we do the field, councilors, do you have any questions about the successful, what was presented?
Not specific to that.
Okay, by all means.
Thank you. So failed override, we'll talk about staffing, programs and activities, and district programs and services, sort of the same cadence here. So at Mountain View School, a failed override would eliminate or reduce the following positions: full day preschool, 3 positions; classroom sections in kindergarten, grades 2, 3, and 5 for a total of 6 positions; special education teachers, 2 positions; interventionist, 2 positions. If you don't know what an interventionist is, it's somebody who provides targeted support, some of our tier 2 and 3 services. So kids that are struggling, with math or literacy, they're teachers who are able to sort of figure out, identify the gap and give them, sort of basically small group instruction to help them shore up that gap. Adjustment counselor position, a school psychologist position, 2 registered nurse positions, 2 librarians, 3 speech and language pathologists, 1 band position, 1 music position. So it'd be a total of 24 positions at Mountain View. For Easthampton High School, a failed override would reduce the following positions: ELA 1.5, math 1 position, health 1 position, technology and engineering 1 position, world language 0.5, early childhood 1 position, special education 2 positions, librarian 1 position, Bright programming 2 positions. Bright programming is a program to support sort of students who have our most vulnerable students. They have interrupted educational experiences, and we have a clinician who works very closely with them to make sure that they're on track and that they feel like they can enter school space. That is a total of 11 positions at the high school. If you notice, there's a little asterisk next to some of these positions, and those are those converted positions that I was talking about. So it would be converting, say, a teacher to a paraeducator or an assistant role. So this would impact the nurses, the librarians, speech and language, and special education positions.
That's a question.
Yes.
So why those positions?
So we looked at class sizes, right? So we took a look at, we worked really closely with the building leaders, myself, special education director. So first thing we did was we looked at special education services and delivery grids. Okay, we have this many grids, these students need these, we have to require these services. Okay, if we look at, we went by each grade level, went through every single student service delivery grid. They need this. We created spreadsheets. Okay, we need this number of teachers to meet this need. We looked at grade 3 enrollment. Okay, we have 90 students. What is sort of the least number of teachers in the highest acceptable classroom enrollment we could possibly fit into a classroom? And then we looked at, unfortunately, like librarians, we're trying to cut wherever we could while adhering to legal mandates and what we are required to do. In Easthampton High School, we looked at course enrollment for those decisions as well.
Because I'm looking at those, a lot of them. I'm looking at students who have special needs. I'm looking at students who they may experience a tragedy, and those are the individuals who are basically on the front line, so to speak, of kind of addressing those kind of challenges. And so I'm trying to wrap my head around services to students who are in a vulnerable situation.
Unfortunately, cutting $2 million in personnel, it doesn't leave much room.
Thank you.
So the failed override for programs and activities, we'd no longer be able to fund middle school or high school athletics. I talked a little bit about participation. So just to give you a little bit of context for sports, sports cost the district approximately $160,000. And that's things like transportation, coaching stipends, is the athletic director's salary, field use, all of those things. So on average, it's $160,000. They do create revenue, right? So through gate receipts and through student fees that families pay for their student to participate, they generate about $200,000. So overall, the program is about $360,000. But the school district, the line item in the budget is combined for sports is $160,000. In addition to that, we would no longer be able to fund stipends for advisors for extracurricular activities and clubs. And that includes the drama club, so the plays, band and chorus, National Honor Society, things like ski club, yearbook, student council, We the People. And there's other clubs and activities that we would also not be able to fund the stipend for the teachers to do the work for those clubs.
I have a quick question there, actually. I only bring this up because I think this is something that we've seen in a lot of places in the budget. In your budget where the override fails, is the fact that $200,000 of revenue is gone, is that also accounted for?
So that comes out of a revolving account. So we don't even consider that 200,000.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. So the failed override for the district, we would be able to continue with some of those transforming the middle school experience courses that I talked about, digital literacy, financial literacy, and civics and media literacy. We'd ask teachers to teach different content, but we wouldn't be able to do world language, theme, band, or music. And for the district, so the same things that we're cutting for the successful override, they transition to the failed override with adding, we're just making more significant cuts to the professional development. We would reduce transportation for McKinney-Vento and foster care. And things like any additional conferences or software, we would just try to cut as much of that as we possibly could.
Can you explain what McKinney-Vento is?
So McKinney-Vento is our most vulnerable students. It is for our unhoused students. So if a student finds themselves in a situation.
You're going to check into those?
Yeah.
So we're not saying we're going to cut transportation for those two groups of people because by law, we have to provide that transportation. If you'll remember, a few years ago in the state, there was a lot of transitional housing, there were shelters, right? We had a lot of migrant families that were sheltered around the state. And so over the past couple of years, we were budgeting really high amounts because we had really high expenses. We had originally in our FY27 budget kept those level funded, but we've seen this year that we've had much lower expenses in those two categories. So we were able to lower the budget for those two expenses. So we're not saying that we're no longer going to provide those services because we have to by law, but based on this year's expense compared to the past 2 years worth of expenses, we felt comfortable decreasing the amount in the budget for those two services as a point of clarification.
Can you just continue to explain what it is?
Yeah, so if a
Thank you for
student finds themselves unhoused, living in a temporary housing situation, we would provide transportation for them to continue to attend school. And again, foster care students, if they're temporarily placed, we do transport them because they're a member of our school community.
Thank you.
Counselors, questions?
I have a comment I have some comments more than questions, if that's okay.
Sure, good for it.
Although I'll start with, I did have one question that came up. Can you just clarify what classroom sections are?
Yeah, so in third grade, if we had 4 classroom homerooms, I guess we would call them, we would go down to 3 homerooms.
I have just one question. Early on in the budget document, there's a section that talks about total staffing levels that has become a bit of a talking point in the community. And that shows the staffing levels within the school district having risen quite a bit over the last 5 years. So that's the last 2 years. But it was showing an increase of about 40 FTEs. And I'm just curious, what if they're if you could help to clarify, is that accurate or is that are we looking at that the right way or?
So I don't know where those numbers came from. We have, we could put together those numbers for the school department. We just want to make sure that we are not including things like substitutes or lunch monitors.
Mm-hmm.
We want to make sure that if we're talking about FTEs, we are talking about FTEs. And making sure that if an educator, it's a little complicated. So we do basically our own personnel up here. So if a teacher leaves and we hire a teacher sort of mid-year, I want to be sure that we are calculating that position as only one person. So we have had some turnover, right? We're hiring, and we also convert positions. Last year we had, a sub-custodian who turned into a full-time custodian, just making sure that that's not duplicated,
Mm-hmm.
that number. If they're onboarded again, I want to make sure that FTE is accurate.
Okay, but you're saying that the numbers that are in the budget document didn't come from up here?
Those numbers predate Michelle or I being here. So we spent part of today trying to track down where those numbers came from. We haven't.
Would you mind coming up to the podium?
Oh, sorry. That same question came to our office earlier today, and I started here with the district a year ago, February, and Michelle started in July. So those numbers that are in that book predate either one of us being here. So they're not in my spreadsheets and they're not her spreadsheets. So we spent today digging into trying to figure out where those numbers came from. And we haven't been able to identify where they came from yet.
I see. I would love it if you do get any clarification on that, if you could just send the council an update. I think that there's a couple other places where we were getting some questions about that. And I'm just trying to get to the bottom of it.
Absolutely.
Councilors, other questions? Comments?
Yeah, thank you. No specific questions. In fact, I found myself, as I was, reviewing all of this information, sort of surprised, sort of not surprised that I actually had fewer questions than I was expecting, because I think what you've presented unfortunately makes a lot of sense. The schools are, heavy on personnel, and so of course, when you're looking to make significant cuts, that's where you're going to have to go. Just because it makes sense doesn't mean it's not devastating. And to Councillor Denham's earlier point, I think about these students, we have so many obligations to class sizes and to kind of the core subjects that, once again, of course, you're going to have to look to these support roles to cut. And I cannot help but consider all of the students that rely on those services to succeed in our district. And the long-term impact that will have on our district. And so I just want to say that into the record and make clear, for anybody who is on the fence, this is some eye-opening information for people to consider.
Thank you both for this information. I guess just given what you just said, the first thing that comes to mind is this is your first year. And that's a lot. A lot to have to take on. I'm sure this wasn't obviously anticipated. Had multiple conversations and could feel the excitement of being able to start something new. And then to be facing this particular challenge. I was here last night and I listened to the experiences of students, and I listened to the experience of the teachers that are receive slips, non-renewal slips. And obviously that was very heartbreaking to hear. Last week, we invited the We the People to City Council and recognized their achievements at both the state level and the national level. And also, they had the opportunity to share their experience. And I think that it was very clear, and I don't want that to be missed, that teachers in Easthampton have a profound impact on the lives of students. I don't want that to be lost, because sometimes I think we look at this, right, and we forget about the human toll, human impact of losing important people in our lives. And when I see those positions that are lost, again, the most vulnerable students who are going to be most impacted, and that's going to have long-term impact on the trajectory of their life and whether or not they're successful as students, whether or not they go to higher education, whatever it is that they go to, that's going to have also an impact on the city. So I'm very appreciative of everything that the teachers do, and the paraprofessionals, and everyone who had the librarians, custodial staff, everybody who touches the lives of the students. And again, I'm very sorry that this is your first year, but I don't want people to forget that you do have impact. And people's lives and students, young people's lives are changed as a result of this.
I remember my interview, and I talked about a professor that I had who changed my life. And I think if you ask young people, if you ask adults, who was the person in your life who changed your life? Typically it's, sometimes it's a family member, but typically it's an educator who made them persevere, who made a difference, who made an impact, who made them reach for higher than, or saw something in them that they never saw in themselves. So that is very powerful. And the work that we do as educators is very impactful. And we do recognize that behind every single one of these numbers here is a person with a family, with experiences, and with a lot to give to our community.
Thank you.
Thank you. I thought of one other thing that jumped out to me during the presentation here. Specifically, I'm going to kind of zoom out a little bit. There was a lot of discussion in the years that I spent on the school committee about sort of the reserve funds and how much money was in those accounts. And one thing that I learned at the time that I thought was really important to understanding how we used that money was that these were essentially revolving accounts, so that and the district had gotten to a point where essentially whatever money was being spent was the money that we were anticipating coming in. And so truly they were there, the money was there in case of emergencies. And I bring this up, I just feel a little, I guess, disheartened about sort of the efforts to spend down those accounts, because if the money was for an emergency, we are in that emergency now, and it would have been great to have that. And so I just wanted to put that out there for everybody who might have misconceptions about those reserve accounts, and encourage that spending down, because I don't think it has helped the situation that we are in now.
I have a question, and this is just sort of this is a tough question, particularly because this is your first year here, and I understand there's a lot of just getting your bearings that's still going on probably. But I think that one of the biggest tensions that I've experienced in my time on the finance committee has come from trying to figure out what to do to deliver the services that our students need in the face of changes to the cost of doing business as a city that just can't possibly be kept up with when we have a 2.5% increase on our revenue cap. I mean, I feel like this has been an experience for the last probably 4 years where we've had the school committee, the superintendents, really dedicated, principled people who I really look up to and sometimes I feel learned a lot from, who I don't think would mess around about this stuff at all. Genuinely say with complete conviction, this is a level service budget. This is us not providing any new services. And yet the cost of providing those services has gone up 9-10%. And our ability to raise property taxes has gone up 2.5%. It's something that I don't blame. I want to make this 100% clear because this is a tough question. This is a loaded and emotional time. I understand that this is a thing that is happening to school districts, that we are not alone in it happening to us, that this is not, somebody saying that anything that this is an extreme, a force coming in, and there's things like if the price of gas goes up, the price of our transportation goes up. It's just there's not much way of getting around that. So there's things like that there's, the tuition at some of these places that we have to place some kids at goes up. This isn't a negotiation. We're price takers in a lot of this. And yet we're also in a situation where we're asking people to make a big sacrifice and doing an override. And a question that I keep getting from families is what are we doing to make sure that we're not right back here in 2 or 3 years? And so I know I'm not expecting you to have all the answers to this, but anything that you can share about your broader vision for the next, for and how an override would, or a failed override or a successful override would affect that, would really just help me to understand sort of the big picture.
So
Michelle, do you want to have a seat at the microphone?
I think we're trying everything, right? Julia Franks is an incredible business finance director. We renegotiated a copier contract. Sounds little, right? But over 5 years, that's $80,000 we're saving. Plus, they're more energy efficient. So anytime we can cut costs, we're looking at our van services now. All right, we have to renegotiate our van pool contract. We're looking at our transportation contract for the upcoming year, right? It depends on who bids the contract and all of those items. But we are trying to uncover any sort of inefficiencies that we have across the district. We made some of those changes for the level service budget, right? We knew that we had, we reorganized leadership at Mountain View, right? Can we try with fewer administrators? It's in the budget. We cut a position. We went from head of schools, 3 principals, to a principal and 2 assistant principal positions. That was a change that we are trying to make, and we're trying to figure out any way in which we can produce cost savings. We're working with Durham, our transportation provider, right now to see if we can move from some of the vans to minibuses. We have, some of these things are, in IEPs, and we have to work through that, but we are trying everything we can to make sure that we are being as cost efficient as possible. What else have we done this year? Software, right? Instead of, we're using 2 different software platforms. Okay. We're down to 1. All right. We've combined those 2 softwares. How can we work with downstairs? Technology department. Is there a way we can streamline services there? We're looking at our phone services. Okay. Can we both use the same phone service? We are looking at Microsoft. We are looking at every subscription. We're looking at everything to try to save some money. We want to keep as many staff in front of our kids as possible. So we'll work tirelessly to get that done at the district level. Grants is another thing. And I mentioned it before. It's how we adopt any curriculum in this district. There is no curriculum budget in this district, which is very surprising. We don't have a line item to purchase new curriculum. We have to go for a grant, get the grant approved if we want to buy any books or curriculum. We're doing it. And that's how we're committed to ensuring that we have high quality instructional materials in front of kids. And if there's a free resource out there that's of high quality, we will be using it.
Michelle, I'm going to add to this. So I think Michelle and Julia are incredibly expert in their fields.
Could you please state your name?
Hi, Laura Scott. Yes, school committee chair. So Julia and Michelle are both expert in their field, but they just joined our district. This is their first year in district, both of them. So I think that question to them it's not unfair, but it's a little, their historical knowledge of the city is a bit shallow. So I would say that what we see, having been here a bit longer, when I began in 2013 on the school committee, the condition of the schools, the high school had to be replaced because it was in danger of losing its accreditation. Now it is considered a destination high school that has college level offerings, career readiness offerings. They have thriving enrollment at CTech. And we are also proud to send many of our students to Smith Oak because we have a broad, diverse body of learners. Not all are going to a 4-year college, some are going into trade, some are going into private business, and they all get those opportunities. So what we see is we're approaching this precipice, which is something that we discussed last night that I think Councilor Dunham saw us discuss. If you look back 10 years in the city, the condition of the school district, it is unrecognizable today to what it was a decade ago. And we're enormously proud and grateful for that. And what we see happening is it is all about to slip through our fingers. that, I remember the difficulties we had when we would negotiate new contracts with teachers and we would get them to agree to a 001. And that went on for years and years and years. That we underpaid our staff. We sacrificed talent for a cheaper budget option again and again and again, and asked more of our professionals while paying them less. I think we've spent the last 5 to 10 years trying to right size those things, trying to pay our para educators and our teachers a fair living wage, making sure that our custodians and administrative assistants, that was a particular point of contention in our last round of contract negotiations, they were underpaid by 40% compared to neighboring districts. They are now making a competitive wage, not a ridiculous wage. We are not wasteful. This is not fat on the bone, but these people are they're doing dignified work and they're giving dignified pay for that. I guess the point of what I'm trying to say is, how do we think this will, if the override were to pass, can we guarantee anything? Of course not. Nobody can guarantee anything. If they guarantee you, they're lying. What we can say is we are very practiced in being very frugal and prudent with our resources. And if we can just maintain and protect all of the accomplishments that this entire community has sacrificed to see this level of achievement, it is all about to fall apart in 10 days if this override doesn't pass. That we are trying to compensate people fairly and offer a satisfactory public education to the next generation of learners. And the costs are exceeding our ability to collect revenue, period, full stop. That's it. I could go on for hours, but that's our question. This would correct the ship. This is going to balance out choice in, choice out. This is going to cut down on charter out numbers. This is going to allow us to maintain future revenue generators like our preschool program, help us bring Head Start back into our building, to honor that promise that we made to some of our most marginalized community members when we built our new school. We never made good on that promise. We were this close to making good. And I'm tired of the rug getting pulled out after the hard work of this entire community. So that's all for to say.
Thank you. Any other questions, councilors? Members of the public, anybody have any questions, comments, suggestions, anything? Yeah, if you just want to line up.
I mean, did you need a laptop?
I do.
And then once the people in the room have gone, if anyone who wants to speak online can just raise their hand, and we'll call on the people online after the people in the room have gone.
Kathy Wazinski, Overlook Drive. I would reiterate my question from earlier that apparently was muted, so most people didn't hear it if they were online.
We unmuted you right when you started to talk.
But it does pertain to this budget, and we had asked for a line item, itemized budget, which would detail out roles, staff roles, taxes, fringe, all of those details that it would be helpful to review and understand where the money is going. I think one of the other things that would be helpful for people to understand is if you make the cuts without the override, what is left? So if you're cutting 2 librarians, does it leave 2 librarians for the elementary and middle school, or does it leave 1? And I don't see in those cuts really any administration cuts, either at the district level or the school level. And one of the things that is only in the override doesn't pass budget is the cutting of the mass school committees membership. Why not cut that right from the beginning? A lot of school districts are cutting that. I think money could be best spent elsewhere than on a membership such as that. So I think having a line item budget with the roles listed out and looking at what cuts can be made for administrators and whether we can freeze salaries rather than cutting staff. Thank you.
Anyone else in the room? Sure. How about once everyone's gone, we can just have people answer. Because there might be some.
Hi, my name is Julie Slava. I live at 14 Nichols Way in Easthampton. So thank you for that presentation. So just a couple of things. And this reality has been, the reality for Massachusetts communities for 40 years. I know I'm like really aging myself, but it's been a very long time since the Proposition 2.5 sort of process began, and we've been through a lot of different economic challenges in terms of the Great Recession and a lot of other stuff. But this has continued without a lot of changes to assist communities in doing the things that they do. The most important of which I think is education, public safety, environmental protection, those kind of things. And one of the things that I've learned by as a new resident, not a parent of children in the schools, but somebody who really cares about this community and has always cared about the communities I've lived in, is that there are a lot of really talented and expert individuals here who are leading departments, who really know their stuff. And the community should be really proud of that. I think that they've done an incredible job presenting what is a really difficult role in terms of a lot of demands, as well as a lot of regulations that are good regulations that protect people and children and firefighters and police. I'm sorry. And that they operate within that environment, doing the best that they can. I've seen a lot of budget information, and I have a budget background. I think that we hire the people who know what they're doing in this community, like in many other communities, who know how to plan the budgets and how to figure out how they're going to cover classrooms and cover the times when we need firefighters to be working. And I think that it's, I'm not interested. I don't think much of the community is interested in seeing sort of the full-time equivalents and the really specific budgets, because honestly, I don't know if I have the expertise to look at those. So I feel like we've really gotten what we need. And I think that the challenge is not figuring out additional ways to cut really quality services and services that are really at the edge here in Easthampton. I mean, there's no waste in this community and in these budgets. And what the focus needs to be is figuring out how to raise additional revenues and how to work with the state to make sure that they are bringing the resources here that they need to bring, and that we're figuring out ways to make this community affordable for people so that they can stay here. So I just want to thank, it's been sort of an interesting way to sort of look at a school district that I'm not familiar with, that my kids haven't gone through. My kids had incredible educations where they went to school. I did as well. And I think what the superintendent said, which is so important for what you want for a community, is every student to have experiences with teachers that will influence them for the rest of their lives. And that's what every kid in this community and in this country really deserves, and we should be trying to provide them.
Anybody else in the room have any questions, comments, suggestions?
Hi, my name is Kira Henninger. I live on Maple Street in Easthampton. I have two kids at Mountain View Middle School in the 7th grade. I'm gonna try my best to make it through this comment. Laura Scott summed up perfectly. We are at a turning point right now. We're either going to get to the point where we can be really proud of the progress we've made. Since my kids entered the district in kindergarten, it has improved each and every year. There have been dedicated community members and parents and students, which I'm really proud to see in our community, standing up and voicing their own opinions, which is due to the amazing educators that we have, been able them to do so and encourage them to do so. For that to continue, this override has to happen. As you can see, there's 3 or 4 slides of cuts, even if it does pass. Already, our middle school is not comparable to any other middle school in our community. We have no world languages, we have no electives. Band and chorus happen in piecemeal. It is not a separate class. It's not a dedicated time for that to grow. Despite that, we do have a thriving music program. And all of that's going to disappear. I'm not happy with the failing override budget, and nobody should be. Anyone who wants to see a thriving community knows that not only do we need core classes that are mandated by the state, but we also need those electives that bring students who are struggling in more traditional classes, who show up because of their interest in the arts, in music, in sports, and after-school programming. And that's what gets them to school. And that's also what gets them to be successful in school, because you have to maintain grades to participate in extracurricular sports. And if that's what teenagers need to keep them motivated and engaged in school to kind of get that to that next level, they need that. If the override does not pass, our school is going to collapse. There is going to be a complete mass exodus of families who have been fighting for a long time to get just the basics of what other local communities have had, that we now have a lot more and are on the cusp of getting, because our superintendent who came in has been amazing. From the start, she came in and said, I want to learn this community. I want to know where you've been, where you want to go. And every decision I'm going to make is going to be driven by those values. And she presented them at the very beginning. I think our city budget should also think about what are our city's values and what does that look like? If the override passes, there are still many student-facing position cuts to the school budget. I understand it is the biggest budget in the city, but I watched so far the other budgets presented, and if the override passes and if the override does not pass. And if the override passes in many of the other city budgets, things like their professional development, things like traveling costs to get to the professional development, those came back into those budgets. And I know they're small amounts, but if we can add all of those small amounts together to save one additional teacher, if the override passes, that would be in line with the community's values. If you talk to anybody about this budget, there is a big push for the school to get what it needs. There is a big push for direct services not getting cut. I don't think we should have to cut anything. I agree that there's not fat on our budget. People who go to conferences to maintain their certifications and licenses deserve their workplace to pay for those things that they need to uphold. But if we have to talk about cuts, then it has to be things that are not student-facing, public-facing positions, and that goes to public safety as well. I guess I have a lot more to say, but this is what's specific to the budget, so I will stick to Tom's direction there. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Sam Hunter. I'm on the school committee. I live at 8 Mayor Street. Now you can all find my house. It's easy to find anyway. One thing I just wanted to clarify, Laura just clarified with me that there won't be any librarians in the middle school. So that's
Or elementary or high school.
Or elementary or high school.
No librarians.
No librarians in the district. In the override or the non-override? The non-override.
If the override fails, no
No
librarians
school
in any
librarians
district
in
school.
any district school. But the thing that I wanted to also just point out, special education is confusing and very like multi-layered. And it's also the area that I have the most knowledge in. And I just wanted to point out that one of the things that we do in our schools, it's called multi-tiered system of supports, MTSS, because everything has to have an acronym. And the idea behind MTSS is that you intervene with students who need a little bit of extra assistance earlier on. First, you create a school environment that's welcoming and accessible, where people can get their needs met. without a lot of extra supports. And then that's your tier 1 level of supports for everybody. And then your tier 2 level of supports are for students who are starting to fall behind in some way or who are having some degree of difficulty, but maybe they don't qualify for an IEP at that point. They haven't fallen far enough behind. So you intervene with some extra math tutoring or an extra reading group or the Bright Classroom, which is a classroom for kids who generally have returned from psychiatric hospitalization a lot of times and need kind of an easy way to sort of ease into school again. So those are the services that Counselor Denham pointed out are the ones that are being cut. And the reason why is because with them being tier 2 supports, they're not written into anybody's IEP. The IEP these are legally mandated supports that have to be provided to students with disabilities in order to make progress and receive a free and appropriate public education. But students who are receiving tier 2 services don't have an entitlement in the same way to those services. So in order to preserve the tier 3 supports, which we're legally obligated and morally obligated to provide, we have to look for the supports that we are morally obligated to provide, but not legally obligated to provide. And so unfortunately, that does mean things like our Bright program, which prevents students from needing much more expensive out-of-district placements. And also, I think more importantly, is allowing students who previously would not have come back to school and get a diploma and graduate with their peers, and that's enormous. So I just wanted to point that out because it's a little bit confusing from the outside. There's a reason why there are certain special ed services that would be cut, and it is because they are not necessarily, they are in that tier 2 section, which of course is going to create more students who need tier 3 supports, which of course is going to create more legally mandated services that we have to pay to provide. And one thing I found in public education is that when you try to save a little bit of money on something like this, you often end up costing yourself a lot of money in the long run. So, thank you.
Just as the next speaker is coming up, I just remember if there's people online who want to speak, please raise your hand. There's a little hand button, and you'll just be up next after we're done here with people in the room. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Brad Riley, 11 Irving Street. So, this is a really important topic to me. As I've sat at that bench with you all over the years, I've talked in pretty great detail about what the school system here means to me and what the process of education and being educated meant for me as an individual. I was very fortunate to grow up in a school system that provided a lot of extracurricular activities and provided a way forward for children like myself who lived in rural agricultural communities to be able to see the world in a different way than what was presented to us. And when I moved to Easthampton 14 years ago, I started to see what felt like a bubbling within the community of a similar value in education. I saw our high school get rebuilt, and I saw the bonding vote pass for the new school. And a lot of that is what led to me wanting to become a city councilor. In fact, if I recall, President Denham, I think the very first thing that you and I ever did as city councilors was to walk through the new school as it was being built. And there was something about being in that building and knowing that this is something that our community values that just lifted my spirits in a way that I can't convey in just a couple of minutes here standing at a podium. And I remember talking to my husband and saying, boy, that's a lot of money to put towards a school, right? To know that the school cost $109 million. That's how much the people in this community that we just became a part of care about education. And, I've been a little disheartened to hear some of the narratives about the budget process and things that people have said about our school systems. And it makes me pause and think, are we really okay with defunding some of these programs, right? I mean, we were just hearing in the presentation that, removing athletics and removing extracurricular activities and all of these other things that might lead to students choicing out into other communities. And I got to tell you, as an individual myself, if I had the opportunity when I was younger and I was in a high school where my needs were not being met, and sometimes this is not just for fun, right? Sometimes the needs that these extracurricular activities offer are life-saving for certain youth, right? Being a part of, a band community or We the People or being able to play sports is positively correlated with improved mental health and well-being and decreasing rates of suicide and depression and anxiety. I wouldn't blame children in our high school for wanting to choice out and leave if these things are not being offered. And if that does lead to a sort of downward spiral where we have people choicing out of the program, which means we have less revenue. And then I just wonder, like, what was the $109 million for, right? I wish that as a community, we could pause and think back to who we were when we agreed to pay for these schools, for both of them, and to say, this is a value that we believe in. And to remember that that's who we were and that's the stuff that we believe in. I mean, when I served on the city council, I think there was maybe 2 people that in the entire time that I was a city councilor that didn't work for an academic institution or didn't have a master's or a PhD in education, right? And I just think, like, everybody knew who we were when we were being elected. So it's like, this is clearly a value within our community to believe in education and to have educators represent us. And I don't know, I feel like we're falling away from where we came from. And if people in our community truly don't care about the meaning and purpose of education, I would just ask them to pause and say, why did you spend $109 million of our money and the state's money for a building and we're not going to put things in it? So yeah, I mean, I have so many more thoughts, but I don't want to take up anybody else's time. I thank you all for the work that you're doing. This is unprecedented stuff, and I know how difficult it is. I sat in your seats, and this is beyond anything that I've ever experienced. So thank you for doing this with as much dignity and grace as you have so far. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. All right. I think we'll switch to the online people. Pete, I see your hand. You just unmute.
Hi, yeah. I guess on the back of that last comment, I've been in Easthampton not very long, about 3.5 years, but we've got a 3-year-old daughter and a newborn. So they're going to be going to the school someday, and it's really just kind of bleak hearing this outlook for the future of the schools. And that was something that attracted us to Easthampton when we were looking for houses, was the fact that new schools had been built pretty recently. And so it is looking at the prospect of this no override situation. It is sort of enough to make us kind of reconsider living in Easthampton or going to Easthampton Public Schools, which is not the place I wanted to be. We really like our house, we like our neighbors, we like our neighborhood. So yeah, it's depressing to look at that situation where there's all these teachers cut and no librarians and no extracurriculars and no sports, and think about that as the future for our young kids right now. That's all.
Thanks, Pete. Gwen, I see your hand.
Hello, I'm Gwen Morrissey, 17 Mayor Street, Pete's neighbor, Sam Hunter's neighbor. I'm also the chair of the Economic Development and Industrial Commission for Easthampton. That said, I am representing myself, but I want you to understand that that is a thing that I think about in the ways I understand how to be a member of this community. So 2 par-baked thoughts. One is that we know well from many, many decades of studying this. I'm an education researcher by training and trade, that disinvestment in schools is related to your economic future. It is related to how much you pay to exist in the world after your schools have diminished in their ability to provide a well-rounded education. It changes the likelihood of your community being invested in by companies, jobs coming to your community, families bothering to move here, to live in the housing that we are building. I know it's a touchy subject, but we have a lot of housing going in. And we need families to come live here and to use that housing and to be part of our tax base and to help us pay for the infrastructure that helps us live the life we want to live in Easthampton. And in addition, I so strongly believe in public education. It has just the highest, most admirable historical ideals to me to create well-rounded citizens of democracy. And I cannot imagine living in a district that has no librarians to help kids understand this very challenging world of information and how to figure out what's right and wrong, how to learn more about the world around them. A limited music and art set of offerings is not a way to build people who have a well-rounded way of living in this world. The reduction of the athletics program, I know bothers a ton of people. It would bother me to go to a district that had no sports, that could participate and compete in the regular league stuff that happens in this area, not be able to go to state championships. That's so hard. And I also recognize that this is such a hard moment for so many people to imagine paying that much more. And I hear Laura Scott and I hear Sam Hunter in my head. I hear all of you tonight who have spoken about your strong feelings about this. The history that we've come from disinvestment in public schools, the efforts it took to build Mountain View School in the first place after that quote unquote can being kicked down the road for 50 years. I worry for people who are worried about their financial future. And I don't think this is an option for us. I think we have to bite this one and figure it out. If the city can think about creative ways to make this easier on people who are already struggling on limited incomes in an economy that has become increasingly difficult to exist in, I welcome their participation in that thinking. And yeah, it's a really hard moment. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, yeah, we're back. Cool. But I'm sorry, were you, we just, it crashed right as you were wrapping up, I think, but are you all set?
I'm good.
Okay, great. Mayor Derby.
Thank you. And I think I want to just build off of what everybody else has said, and I appreciate Gwen's comments there because I do truly believe that, as we look at public education, it's really a foundational piece of our democracy, especially as we look at the celebration of 250 years of the United States and, where we've come, and having the ability to have public education is something that we shouldn't consider a privilege. It's something that we should consider a right, and it's our duty to pass this on to the next generation. I think that's really important. And I know we've talked a lot about costs. So I want to address costs just a little bit. At the end of the day, we're going to pay either way. So whether it's upfront and we pay with the extra cost because spending is outpacing our ability to raise revenue, or whether it's the residual impacts that are less controllable and more nebulous, maybe harder to anticipate, but they're there. And I think that that's an important thing for us to understand. Like, in particular, the impact that quality education has on property values. And, I think the estimations are that if this happens, we're going to look at about a 2 to 8% decrease in property values due to the fact that we're going to have attrition. We're going to have more people that are choosing Easthampton, not choose Easthampton to choice in. We're going to have more people choice out. And that is going to be a snowball effect. That is going to have a direct and tangible impact on people's property values. A 2% on the median, we talk a lot about the median household cost, $418,000. A 2% decrease in property value is like $8,300, right? So that's real. And that's significantly more than what we're asking. But I think that more importantly than that is the cost to people, the cost to our children. And I guess that I have a different than some people. I've been an educator for the last 25 years. And I was an educator in some of those fields that are being cut and people consider them extra. Those relationships that you form with those students, those interactions that you have on a daily basis where sometimes you're the only person that they can be comfortable with to check in, to see how they're doing. That is a really important thing. And if kids lose that, that's going to have an impact on our society. If we don't have kids being able to go feel safe in a place that is nurturing and supportive, what is going to happen to them? We know that we're in a mental health crisis for our students right now. And if we take away these critical supports, that is going to have ripple effects into our community and into our society that we cannot anticipate. And I think that as we talk about costs, we can't just talk about the monetary cost, because the impacts of this go way beyond the dollar. And I think that that's something that we need to keep putting out there, because these impacts, and right now I'm just speaking to the school, but I would say that this goes across the board, and it's not just the kids, it's also the teachers that are going to be laid off. They're going to have to find a new way to support their family. So, the stakes are just critically high. And that's why I felt like I was compelled to say something about this. And so I appreciate that space. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Welsh, is there anything that was asked during public speak that we want to respond to at all? Or sorry, I know there's kind of a lot.
I did want to, 0 librarians. We did cut 1 administrative position at Mountain View for our proposed FY27. So while it's not in the override versus failed override, it was thus being fiscally responsible for our proposed FY27 budget. And I think those are the only 2 questions that were asked that I wanted to clarify.
If there's anything else you'd like us to share, well, you probably have a bigger pulpit than we do. So,
yeah, that's one follow-up question. Sure. Before you go, just to clarify that, is there not a state requirement to have 1 accredited librarian within the district? No.
So for NEASC accreditation, it could jeopardize. We are up for. We have our triannual NEASC accreditation coming up. And yes, it does put us in jeopardy of not being fully accredited by NEASC, which is an accreditation agency that sort of, determines whether a school is in the wellness of a school environment and provides feedback and suggestions for accreditation.
Seems pretty serious.
Guess not a follow-up. Are there other domino effect things that would stem from that loss of accreditation that you could speak to, or is that sort of unknown?
I think it would impact, people's perception of our school district if you are not accredited. I think people look to that. And, I feel like Easthampton is a very educated community, and they do look for things and decisions to move into Easthampton. I see an impact on things like, I'm very worried about our accountability measures and our assessment scores. With less staff, we can't do as much. We have a highly qualified staff. When I was, and I know this, but listening to everybody 13, 14, 24 years as public educators, new to this district, who gave up their professional teaching status, who gave up their tenure to be here, I think it is something that was heartbreaking for me as a superintendent, listening to educators who are highly skilled, highly qualified, coming to work here because their kids go here, they live here, they're part of this community, they love this community, they were attracted to this community, and they gave up their security to come here and to have to tell them that unfortunately, because you're a first year in this district, right? We're not talking about the quality of they've been teaching for decades, some of them. And to say to them that we can't secure your position was incredibly challenging. And we know that enrollment in educator prep programs across the Commonwealth, across the nation is declining. So for us to, ever come out of this override and try to replace those individuals is going to be very challenging.
Any last questions? Okay, thank you so much. All right, I think that's all we've got for education. So let's turn to the revenue side of the budget. Would you be able to do the thing this time?
Sure, yeah, so was sent to me.
Let's seems like people want
Standard revenue, the full revenue for BS. Yes. So which one do you want this section?
start with revenue, yes.
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 Yes, override.
Yes, override. Not yes, no override. Yes.
I will. Yes, override
Yes,
versus
override.
no. Oh my God, my brain's gonna fall out of my ears. Okay.
Planning. Can you give me the ability to share?
Of course. I'm gonna someday remember how to do this. It's slightly different than what I was ever.
Right. Revenue budget outline, yes, override.
For this column on. And I will edit.
It's gonna make you share it again. Technology's awesome.
Hey, Dr. Del City Auditor. The revenue projections are calculated with 5 different sections. First is the levy calculation. Second one is the state revenue. Third is the local receipt. Fourth is enterprise receipt. And fifth is other sources. So every single expense or the dollar amount on the budget for expense side, we should have a equivalent dollar amount for as a revenue. The first calculation for taxation, it's standard by the state. You take the prior fiscal year's levy limit. If there's any adjustment to the growth, you take that into consideration. That becomes your new adjusted prior year levy limit. Add 2.5%, add new growth. Right now it's estimated growth because all the growths will be finalized after June 30th. If there is an override, then you add the override amount. debt exclusion. We have two debt exclusion, one for the high school, one for the middle, K through 8 school, which is added under debt exclusion. Amortization of the excluded debt has to do with the premium. If there's any leftover premium from the borrowing proceeds, that needs to be used towards reducing the tax rate because it's part of the excluded debt. That will give us the adjusted levy with premium from the debt exclusion. Then we also take out overlay, which is like allowance for abatements for real estate and for personal properties. Once we calculate all of these things as a plus and minus as shown in the calculation, we can technically collect $42,443,334.66. This is all the estimate. This will get finalized when we do our tax rate recap sometime in November.
Can I ask just two questions before we move to the next section? Okay, so the first question I have is what happens if, because I don't think this is what happens if we exceed our overlay? I'm just thinking like, you know, if the taxes go up and maybe more people seek exemptions, like do we need to do an appropriation to, or how does that work?
So I think before Modernization Act for Mass General Law, the rule was that you put all the overlays by levy year, and only that year's taxes can be exempt from that levy year. But now it's like 5-year bucket, so you can track it by levy year. However, it does not matter if it's not the same levy year. So at the end of the day, if you have like little extra in there in another levy year, you can use it towards current fiscal year's abatements.
Do we have some from previous years?
Yes, we do.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
My second question is just about the new growth. I noticed is different across those. Would we take some different policy around new growth in the case of whether the override happened or not?
So normally what I do is I ask our assessor to provide me the new growth dollar amount. It's different because if you see the labels of the column up top, it says FY25, FY25 recap, FY26, FY26 recap. Mm-hmm. So when I'm doing estimates for 2027, I asked assessor what would be the growth, and she said $200,000 conservatively. But when I do the tax rate recap, that's when the real values and real growth numbers will be in. And that's why you're seeing there is a difference in the column. So the recap column is the actual number when tax rate recap gets done.
Sure. Let me come back to that later. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. The second section of the revenue. I'm sorry. The second section of the revenue is the cherry sheet, which is the state revenue, state receipts and offsets. I pulled all these numbers from the state budget. When I pulled this number for the budget, I have used House budget, not the Senate Ways and Means. This will be finalized also before the City Council meeting.
Okay.
Questions?
Any questions on this? No, I don't at this time. Thank you.
So the third section is the local receipts. These are the categories which is determined by the state. It is also part of the tax rate recap page 3 for the local receipt. The best practices are to estimate about 75 to 80% of prior fiscal year to be conservative. This particular budget does not show any conservative approach in this. As of this morning, when I ran the reports, we are about $1.1 million short from what we estimated last year. The last year's, projection was $6.553 million. And this year I'm anticipating it's going to be 6.086 for yes override. There is a little buffer room, but there are also one-time money is included in the current projection for fiscal year 26. What happens with this calculation is June 30th, when I close the books, and in November, when I do the tax rate recap, state doesn't allow me to do any dollar amount more than what was actually collected on June 30th. So these numbers are going to change again when the books are closed and I'm doing the tax rate recap.
And just to be clear, you're saying that they might change in a way that they go down.
So as I said, we have to have the balanced budget. Expense budget is going to be finalized before June 30th. Revenue budget gets adjusted when I do the tax rate recap. If you see the column which says FY 2026 recap, you'll see the difference between what was budgeted in 26, which was sometime in May and June, and adjusted when I did the recap in November, and the column is labeled as FY 26 recap column. If you see, just to give an example, what will happen, because I can't give you example for 27, so I'm going to go back to 26. In fiscal year 26 for taxation, the estimate was 34,308,155.28. But when I trued up balanced the taxation portion with the tax rate recap, it turned out to be 34,594,453.55. So there is a difference in this. Same happened with the state revenue. When I was originally doing the budget estimations for the revenue before June 30th, we were anticipating that the net receipts would be $14.15 million and change out, versus the actual came in as a $14.13 million. So all of these numbers get adjusted when it gets screwed up during the tax rate recap. At the end of the tax rate recap, I have to make sure that the expense budget is totaling the revenue. If not, and if I don't have ways to cover, then we have to make the cuts or come up with a reduction in the budget in November.
Okay. Understood. Yeah.
Okay.
Unless, do you have any questions? That makes sense to me.
Enterprise receipts. So the expense side of the budget also has enterprise section. Enterprise is self-funded entity. The number which is shown here is the total of enterprise budget plus indirect cost. The theory behind this is if enterprise is on its own business entity under the city of Easthampton's business, what if they are not part of the city of Easthampton? They have to hire auditors, treasurer, collector, HR directors. They're using facilities here, the municipal buildings here, so they have to go somewhere else and find the business places to run the place, and they might pay for rent. So what we do is like we charge them back all the equivalent costs, which if they are sharing with general fund. So the number which is shown in the enterprise receipt is the total of their budget plus the indirect cost. I can go into more detail of that calculation.
I think just for the benefit of the public though, when we're talking about enterprise, what we really mean is water and sewer, right? Like are there any additional things that fall under?
Wastewater. Yes. Water, sewer, and wastewater.
Right. So those are things that they exist within the city, but they are funded by your water and sewer bills. And so they sort of exist as almost like a business that's within the city. And what you're saying is that since they use our administrative, like they use the city administrative services and the city facilities, they charge a rate, they charge a fee, or the city basically charges a fee from that otherwise basically independent organization, which is the only revenue we receive from them, and the rest of it has to be used on them functioning as a business.
Yes, and their accounting also goes separately too. So general fund in my world is general fund versus enterprise fund. So services used shared with general fund by enterprise pays for it. When enterprise, it's an expense for the enterprise, general fund is a revenue. So for the taxation side, it's a revenue. The other thing, what happens with it is like at the end of the fiscal year when I close, general fund leads into free cash, and enterprise leads into retained earnings. So there's two separate terminologies used, but at the end of the day, it's all fund balance, but it's in different sections. It's all one, but it's a different subsection in my world.
Okay, questions, counselors? Let's keep going.
So the fifth section is other sources. CPA is self-funded too. The receipts are that 3% surcharge and the state match, which we get. We do not raise this on the general taxation. It's the CPA surcharge which gets into this account. Amortization amount is not here yet, because that will be another thing which will be adjusted when I do the revenue finalization during the tax rate recap. Sale of lot and parking receipts, those are the task which has been managed by Parks and Rec and Collection Department, and we have revolving accounts for these accounts. So because it's a very minimal clerical work, which is part of a big position, what we do is we take this out of this revolving account to support the general fund to offset that times which needs to accommodate the needs of these two tasks. We are not using overlay. Then there is the $67,666.67. This is part of our debt budget. We have DIF borrowing for 1 Ferry Street, and we are going to fund it through that DIF account instead of raising it on the taxation. So this is going to be like a supporting revenue coming from another funding source to offset an expense. We cannot pay debt out of that fund directly. Every debt needs to be budgeted, but revenue funding source could be from other funding source. So this is one of those kind of expense or debt which we can cover from other funding source. $132,142 from capital stabilization. This is another example of where we have it's part of the DPW admin budget for EV vehicles. It's a 5-year contract. The reason why it's coming out of capital stabilization is that if we use the capital stabilization, we are eligible to get solar credits from federal program. So we are taking the advantage of those programs, which is going to be part of the general fund revenue, but the funding source has to be capital stabilization. It should not be raised on the taxation. Tax rate stabilization, that has been used from 2021, we established this just to ease off the taxation. So the funding comes for this account is from the free cash. So once the free cash is certified, there's an appropriation which comes to the city council. We put that money into the tax rate stabilization and we use it towards the budget. And it's mayor's decision how much amount we want to use it towards the budget.
Okay. And all right.
Okay.
So I'm not going to make you, questions before we go to the next, to the no override section?
I want just to clarify what DIF spending or DIF funding is. Like, what is the acronym?
It's
District improvement.
district improvement.
It's a whole thing.
Funding, right?
That's like a whole other meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And Okay, this all makes sense to me. All right, so then, do you want to just walk us through what's different in the no override section and just why it's different?
So for the first section, for taxation, if it's a no override, we are not gonna have that $6.9 million in there. I do want to say one more thing about this yes override. Though we are taking into consideration 6.9, when if the vote is yes, it's not guaranteed that it's going to be 6.9. So whatever we need to balance the budget in November, that's the amount we're gonna use.
Up to
It can-
6.
Yes, up to. It cannot exceed 6.9. But if, let's say, it comes out to be $5 million that we need to balance the budget, then it will be $5 million. It won't be $6.9 million.
So if, for instance, this council were to make some additional cuts, then and then the oversight did go through, those would come out of the 6 point, and it meant that we didn't need as much to balance the budget. Or if the state decided to step up and release some additional funds.
Yes.
Those are things that would actually bring down the amount that we would need from the 6.9 to some lower number. I have a follow-up question on that, which is that, does that mean that that would also then next year, the, how do I say this? So say that's not the full 6.9, say it's 5, like you said.
Yeah.
And then next year, we've got to go and do our tax levy. We've got Prop 2.5. That 5 is what's being added on. So that means that the amount that gets raised next year would also be lower, and that would continue for perpetuity?
I have to look into that to give you the exact answer. This is first time ever I'm dealing with the override. I think it goes with the levy limit versus the levy.
So it's the levy limit. So in the future, we would be able to, but it's so that we would still be able theoretically to raise it further in the future. It's just all right. Yeah, I get you. I follow. That makes sense. Okay, thank you for the clarification there. All right.
So the first section, as I said, 6.9 is not part of this calculation and no override. Second calculation from the state is as is. I have no say in it.
Can I just jump in real quick? There is another there's the new growth, what I was trying to say earlier, the new growth numbers between the no override and the yes override scenarios are different.
Yes, so this one, the no override one is not a conservative approach at all. So everything is high end, we are estimating that we are gonna get everything what we are expecting. So if you look at the yes override, it says $200,000. No override, it says $300,000. So are we gonna get it? We don't know that. 200 would be conservative and we might come a little bit over that, but I don't know if we will really get $300,000 at that point or not. So it's everything is up to max and no override.
Right. I mean, I see that in the recap for the last few years, it was over 400,000. So I'm not overly worried, but I just want to make sure that we understand that what we're saying is that for our revenue estimates here, in order to present a balanced budget, some of the assumptions that we're making are different between these two budgets, and that if in fact the reality looks more like the assumptions in the yes override than in the no override, then the cuts that we're ultimately going to make might end up having to be even more severe than the ones that are presented in the no override budget. Hopefully, I agree. Hopefully not. I want to make sure that we're on the same page about that, because it's this no override. It could actually theoretically be worse.
It could be.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I can also speak towards this new growth, why it's different. We had a revolving door in assessor's office for almost 3 to 4 years, and we were not capturing the growth which we should have captured. And then when we had the new assessor and the consultant, we were able to capture these growths, but I don't think that is going to be like, we did our capturing, which we missed for almost 3 to 4 years, and we might not see that jump again. So.
Thank you. That's helpful context.
So the second section, it stays as is. It's all state very cheap numbers for receipts and assessments. There's no change in there. So local receipts. Yes, override has a conservative approach, 6.086 million. No override, we estimated 6.5 million, 6.48 million last year. End up needing 6.55 million to balance the budget. And for 27, I'm estimating $7.1 million. If I do a comparison with the revenues collected as of April, actually May 1st week, we have a gap of $1.16 million. So what it means is we have to collect $1.16 million from May 2nd week to June 30th, plus more, little extra, to match the estimated revenue into the local receipt to get up to $7.1 million. So it's not a conservative approach.
Is that likely to happen?
I cannot say that.
I mean, I think I'll say it. It's not. It's. I mean, look, we're more likely to be heading into a recession than a period of economic growth, and local receipts get hurt in a recession. People aren't going out to, dinner. That's going to go down. People aren't building new stuff. That's going to go down. I mean, like I understand what's being done here, and I'm not necessarily. I mean, I'm going to have to give it some thought, but I'm not necessarily suggesting an alternate course of action. I understand that what's being said is let's say the best possible scenario, but like if this year we're not hitting that, then next year it seems extremely unlikely that we're going to hit that unless we come up with a magical new local receipts revenue source, which I am all ears for, but that's probably not really the context of this meeting. Councilors, any questions about local receipts in the no scenario? Okay. Do we want to chat about enterprise and other?
Enterprise, it's a proportionate decrease. The way it gets calculated is, let's say auditor's time. So auditor's budget is $200,000, and now with the no override, there is going to be a reduction, and it's $175,000. So now take the proportion of 175 versus 200,000. That's the difference. It's just a proportionate decrease in the budget is causing the difference between the two revenues with the yes override and no override.
Okay.
The one thing which is also on the table is mayor's office and the finance team is working to put together a proposal to revisit our enterprise chargeback. If it gets passed before the budget hearing, you will see a change in this section also. So that might help us. If it's a little bit more, it might help us with offsetting some of the high projected revenues for no override booked.
Okay. Do you have a sense of what, like, the order of magnitude for, like, if how much money are we talking about, I suppose? Or, I mean, I understand it's the conversation.
Yeah, it's subject to discussion. What was originally proposed was close to $500,000, but we are still negotiating, so I don't know where we're gonna land with that dollar amount. So I can't speak to that until it's finalized with the Board of Public Works.
Okay. But
Other sources?
Yeah, might as well.
So other sources, the only difference in this one is we are using general stabilization for $2.5 million and it's all one-time money. Once it's gone, we don't know what's gonna happen with that.
Okay. And what is our current general stabilization?
About $3 million, 3.4.
So we'd be left with $500,000 in general stabilization. Okay. That's sobering. Councilors, questions? What's up?
I just need a second.
Okay. Okay, I have a question. So when we are looking at, one of the things that this might be a big lift, but one of the things that I keep thinking about a lot is how much a city is really this sort of kind of just dynamic system, right? Like you change one thing, it causes other things to change. So I'm just wondering, like, when other departments have been talking about cuts that they're proposing to make, some of those cuts to me seem like things, we're going to talk about parks. Let's use that, even though we're going to talk about them tomorrow, but just from what I've heard and seen in the budget, like there's suggestions that some of the cuts in the parks to save money could potentially lead to less revenue in terms of tickets for the parks. When you're working with parks on their override budget and their no override budget, does that get factored in, sort of a sense of like, well, if the override doesn't pass and these cuts go through, it's actually going to hit this revenue line item and this revenue line item and actually potentially make things worse?
So during those two budget times, I was not here. I was out of country. But I did hear that parks were saying like the pool services will be closed. So there will be some revenues coming from those are going to be affected, which is part of the departmental revenue under local receipts. It says department recreation. That line item will be affected.
Right. But here it is actually $60,000 higher.
Yeah.
And I just want to drive this point home. I mean, like, I understand the challenge that comes with making guesses about the future. It is a big part of my day job, and everyone's bad at it. Like, so there's that. When I look at these no override numbers, though, like I just consistently get the feeling that if this is the budget we move forward with, that there's a real chance that we don't hit a lot of these numbers, and that in fact the cuts that we make compound the extent to which we don't hit some of these numbers. And I want people to make sure that they understand that, so they understand the extent to which this could actually get it could get a lot worse than what's even in here. There's chances that the sort of dynamic effects, that come back from those initial cuts actually compound and lead to further deficits that lead to further cuts that then might actually lead to further deficits. And that kind of thing is, I mean, it's something that interests me personally because it is the basis of economic impact modeling, which is what I do for a living. But it's like, just seeing it on this page, like here, this no override budget to me, like, and I'm saying that I'm not saying this is a criticism to you. I'm just saying this is a reaction to looking at these numbers. To me, it looks like a booby trap, right? It looks like a thing that if we pass this and say, see, we made the cuts, we balanced everything, there's going to be a whole bunch of other stuff that doesn't realistically happen out of here that ends up biting us probably by October in ways that we're going to end up being in a tough spot about. And I am going to need, like, fortunately, we're not taking any votes tonight, so I'm going to need some time to think on this, but that scares the hell out of me. I'm not going to lie.
So can I explain something about this?
100%.
So when I say that we need $1.16 million till June 30th, technically what's going to happen is June 30th, if I can justify these revenue amounts,
Mhm.
those amounts I can use it to balance the budget. The impact is going to be that it will be snoozed for 6 months. So not in October or November, it's going to be sometime in June again of next year when the projection for revenue is $7.1 million. And let's say we only end up collecting $6.5 million. There is $600,000, which is a revenue loss. And that loss is going to be deducted from the free cash for 2028. So though we are looking at the numbers, we are projecting for 2027. We really have to look at the numbers for 2026 and we can project it. But on the other side, as I said, these numbers are not finalized. So I do not know at this point what our tax rate revenue calculation is going to be finalized. Let's say there is a buffer of $300,000, then I would not need that $300,000 from estimated local receipts. Or enterprise receipts will go up by another $300,000 and now it's $600,000 and I'm able to balance the budget and we are also able to reduce that local receipt from $600,000 and come back to the same number as what we estimated last year.
I understand that, although I did say October when I meant the future. But I did that, so thank you for the clarification there. But I understand there's a lot of things that could change and that there's ways in which, one thing could happen bad, one thing could happen good, they might cancel out. There's a lot of uncertainty here, and I'm not asking you to be a fortune teller. I mean, I just think, I just look at this and there's just a lot of things where I go, that's not going to happen. And that scares me. That's all. Councilor Schmidt, did you have a question?
No, I don't think so. I appreciate you bringing that up and the clarification on that, though. And I think you make a good point.
Okay. I'm going to, if there's anybody in the public who would like to ask a question, I would, and this time, last time what we did is we had everyone ask questions and then at the end I asked Dr. Balczyk, do you want to respond to any of this? And I think that was not a good idea. So I'm not going to do that this time. If people have questions and Hadel wants to answer them, I will give Hadel an opportunity to respond to people's questions or suggestions or whatever.
But Dr. Walsh handled that very well.
Yes, on me very much. So, as are so many things.
So, Mayor Derby, just a couple of quick clarifications. I know that there was some, questions about the diff. And so, district improvement financing was something that we had worked out with the developers of One Ferry Street years ago. And some people perceive that as a tax break. It was not a tax break. It was a way to estimate taxes into the future. So the developer had very clear understanding of what their liability for taxes would be. Those taxes are paid into two different accounts, one through the state, one locally, 6A and 121A. And that money gets used to pay off the $3 million ban. And so, that money is directly used to make improvements within the district. So I just wanted to clarify that piece. The other piece was the tax levy piece. And so if we are able to successfully pass the $6.9 million override and we only need $4 million, by law, we can't tax up to the 6.9. We can only tax to balance the budget. And the rest of that would be excess capacity. And so I think that's an important thing to recognize. Like, we are only going to tax to close the budget. We're not going to use that extra money for extra things. And I'll give you an example. Westfield just did this when they did their budget. They had excess capacity. And so they were able to tax, instead of going for an override, they increased the taxes 4%. So instead of being limited to 2.5%, they added an extra 1.5 and made it 4% because they had excess capacity. So we would then have that excess capacity into the future that would help kind of give us a stable footing as we move forward, which I think is important. And then the last piece, and I'll try to be brief here, is enterprise chargeback. So we are negotiating with the DPW. We are going to try to make sure that we get a very accurate and fair representation of the city services that are being used for enterprise and get that money recaptured back into the general fund to help us with this budget. And another thing that we also are doing that has not been done in the past is we're going to be doing something called a true up. And the true up is like, for example, for health insurance, the costs have gone significantly higher. The impact on the city has been significantly more. And so we're going to go back and we're going to true up the chargeback amount for this year to say how much actually more did we commit from the city side, and we're going to capture that money back. So I just wanted to make sure that those pieces were clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public want to talk about revenues? Go ahead, come to the front.
Julie Slavin, 14 Nichols Way. I just have a couple of questions. One of them is related to what you were talking about, Councilor Peak, about estimating revenues conserved differently in the override versus the non-override budget. And I'm not, the budget we have is the mayor's budget, right? So I guess what I would like to understand better is why you wouldn't do it the same for both, sort of what's the justification? So I'd like an answer to that. And then the other question is just talking about excess capacity, which is so I'd like more of an explanation about that, because the budget that you'll be voting on, if the override passes, should use up the 6.9 million, and I'm not sure what would happen to not do that.
Sure, I can give a couple of, I think I spoke briefly on I'll let them speak to your first question, but to the second one, like one example would be, I think that one thing that cities and towns have been saying in Massachusetts for a long time has been that costs have been going up a lot higher than we've been able to compensate for, but like general government aid hasn't really kept pace. And so if the state, there's 50 something communities that are currently going for overrides, there's probably as many that are going to have to next year, if not more. If the Commonwealth in all their wisdom decided that this was a problem that they wanted to address in a proactive way, and they increased, they rapidly changed their budget at the last minute. I'm not optimistic, but if something like that were to happen, then I think that would be a situation where we could say, hey, we actually are bringing in more state aid than we thought we were going to. So we can balance this budget with the numbers that we have for our expenditures here without drawing the full amount from the tax levy. Does that make sense? Well, I don't know. Yes. No? Well, then yes.
It does make sense, I guess. It makes sense in a logical way, but it sort of doesn't make sense because what we were just talking about additionally is sort of trying to stabilize into the future, right? We don't want to not just looking at fiscal 27, but looking at fiscal 28, 29, 30, and my train of thought, and how we're going to fill, how we're going to make up, for example, I feel like there's somewhat of an interest in, from the residents in doing this, is figuring out how we could, this is going to make me very popular, but how we're going to go back to getting that $1 million back to the school district, right? If the state comes forward, which I think the Senate has actually, looking at unrestricted aid, it would fill a hole that we have. But then, going forward, I think that we want to try to bring things up to where they should be. So that's just a response
Yeah.
to that. I know that there were sort of commitments made about how we wouldn't then go all the way to the full levy. This is also, it's year to year. We know we're already underfunded. I'm not suggesting we pull the wool over the eyes of taxpayers, but the more we can get to sort of stable funding for departments, that's really what we want to do. So.
Yeah, I hear you. Thank you. Hadel, do you want to respond to any of that?
Yeah. So I'm going to respond to this, why the estimating of the revenue for no override and yes override is different. There's $2 amounts to balance with. So with no override, our budget is adding up to $62,053,439.43. Versus the yes override is adding up to $65,358,150. $65,358,155.48. So there is a difference between those two numbers, and those revenue also needs to be balanced into the calculation. One, with no override, DLS has this best practices that you do the conservative approach. It should be 80% of your revenues, not 100 or 105% of your revenues. Versus in yes override, I'm taking all the best practices into consideration. So we would have some kind of like free cash, and then we can start building up, following our financial policies to put some money into the stabilization, and we can bring our stabilization back up to somewhat decent amount. So when there is a crisis, we can use this money. The second, the excess capacity, what I can do is I can take your email and get back to you on that one. It's an assessor's question. So I can take care of that. Yeah. So we can get back to you for that question.
Oh, and Dan is on.
Dan's on the-
Dan is on.
Dan, would you like to weigh in?
Oh, right.
Yeah, on excess capacity, if we don't raise the money in fiscal 27, it's still there for fiscal 28. And the 2.5% is calculated on the total levy limit, not our actual tax levy. So if we have $1 million in excess capacity, it stays on our levy limit, and it would be available in the next year.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. That makes a ton of sense. It's a concept that is new to me because I don't think we've ever had excess capacity in the entire time I've been a city councilor.
There's very little. It used to have 100,000 or 25,000. It was ranging from them. So.
JP.
Kira Henninger, Maple Street. I have a question about the, in the no override situation, it was said we would use 2.5 million of the stabilization. And something that a lot of people are talking about is, so my question is, what would that money actually go towards? Because there's a bigger deficit than that. So what are you prioritizing to use that money for? And I say this because there's a lot of discussion, especially what just happened with South Hadley, where they did not pass the override. They used stabilization funds, and everyone says, see, I knew they would find the money. That's why we didn't pass the override. So I'm curious, what will that be used for? And can we say that ahead of time, or what you anticipate using it for? So it's very clear that it is not good practice to drain down our stabilization, but that it will be used for X, Y, and Z so that we know that's why it's being used, not that you just suddenly found money somewhere. Thank you.
Hadel, would you like to?
Yeah, I can. So the way the revenue budget works is expenses line by line by line, department by department, but revenue is a bigger pot. It's nothing like my classic example. Collection department collects $32 million. They don't get first dibs into those money. Right? It doesn't work that way. So the revenues are a big pot. It's for everybody. It's like to balance the budget. So it's not gonna go towards any specific department that this department is gonna get this money. Use example for South Valley, what they did is they present the override without using the stabilization money. And then they said, oh, there is a stabilization money. But here in Easthampton, what we are doing is like, if there is a no override, so we are already using $2.5 million, which also means that in fiscal year 28, we're gonna start our budget with this whole plus 6.9. Answer your question?
I follow your logic, but I still, what hole is it covering?
It's
What you're balancing the budget, but we're saying we need 6.9, but we're only gonna have 2.5.
well, the rest of it is coming from all the cuts that we're making.
Yes.
Like, so this is the 2.5 is in the no override budget. So we're saying that out of that 6.9 gap, we're gonna cover 2.5 of that gap
Okay.
with cuts, and we're gonna cover the remainder.
That's the difference why
with-
South Hadley itself sounded like they used that money to offset some of their cuts, because that wasn't part of the plan
Yes.
in their budget. Yes, that makes a lot more sense.
So that's part of the plan that we're talking about. I want to also make it clear, like, that in and of itself is a major public policy choice. You know, it's one that we've been making for a few years, and I think there's a long conversation we should have about that. I think there was some of that we always expected to have happen coming out of COVID. We talked about bolstering our reserves so that we could handle sort of the fiscal cliff, and then the fiscal cliff just kept cliffing. And it's got, like, you know, there's, you know, all of these things that have happened. But I just want to point out, like, that just for the purpose of somebody who's saying, I'm not sure which one of these budgets I'm going to go with, maybe you look at the cuts that we're making and saying, you know, well, that's pretty bad, but I can live with that. You know, that's fine. Like, people can come to different opinions. But just to be clear, we're not going to be able, most likely, barring some incredible circumstances, to replenish $2.5 million into general stabilization between now and the next fiscal year, right? Like we're not going to be able to put, like, even if we get a lot of great free cash in October and we decide to put some of that back into general stabilization, it's probably not going to be 2.5 million,
No.
right? So we're going to be in a situation next year where, like, it's not like we've completely solved this, you know, under this budget as currently constructed. It's not like we've solved 100% of the deficit. We've solved some of it with cuts, and we will have to next year make further cuts unless we can miraculously come up with more general stabilization money. And I don't know where that comes from. Sorry if I sound cranky. It's just kind of a grim.
There's no miracle in these numbers, sorry.
If anybody wins an unbelievable amount of money in the lottery and wants to just give it to the city of Easthampton for no reason,
It's still going to be one-time money.
well, maybe we can get an interest-bearing thing.
Start an endowment.
Yeah, start an endowment for the city. Yeah, sounds great. Okay, other questions? Councilor Kozinski.
JP Kwasinski, 47 Hannibal Drive. It's a tough situation all the way around, no matter how you look at it, for every department, for every citizen, and we all share
to be careful with how
we all share that, I think. So, but the questions I have are getting to the questions that just were asked and answered about the stabilization, because it's important to determine, did we make a policy decision to spend that stabilization money? In which budget? Do we spend any stabilization in the no override budget? Do we spend it in the override budget?
Mm-hmm.
How much? How much is then left? And what's the plan for the future?
I think I can handle most of this question myself. In the yes override budget, we are not spending any money from general stabilization. In the no override budget, we are spending 2.5 million. I suppose, I don't actually know how this works with the budget process. The council could consider making further cuts of $2.5 million so that we don't have to spend that stabilization. But I don't know exactly how we'd go about doing that without just sending the entire city of Easthampton into a tailspin. But I'm open to suggestions. Past that, I think that this is we're in that situation, which next year will leave us with $500,000 plus whatever free cash we manage to move into general stabilization once free cash is certified. And next year, we're gonna be back here probably talking about either another override to try and make up that gap or an additional round of cuts. And it'll probably continue kind of like that for the indefinite future is what I can see of it. Hadel, did I get anything wrong?
The one, hold on. The one thing which you asked is what's the plan to spend stabilization money? There is a policy where we contribute out of free cash towards the stabilization, but the purpose of the stabilization is like for general, there is no like unforeseen situations. That's the only thing it says. When we adopted the general stabilization, capital stabilization is restricted for the capital items only. Tax rate stabilization is restricted to offset the taxation towards the budget. So you would only see tax rate stabilization used during the budget process. You would not see any time other than this purpose. So every stabilization has a specific purpose, what you can use it for, but it's not dictated in detail what it could be. Like capital is anything over 5 years of life. That's the capital is eligible for that. But you can't do like anything under that can fall under general stabilization, but it won't fall under tax rate stabilization. Does that make sense? Yeah. There's no specific line items where you can say like, for snow removal, we are going to use general stabilization or like, those kind of things. So.
Anybody else in the room have any questions about revenue? Anybody online have any questions about revenue? Dan.
I'd just like to say on the local receipts, you had a question with the no override.
Mm-hmm.
The Department of Revenue really won't allow us to exceed 100% of what we took in last year without written documentation. So if we took in, let's say, 1.6 million in motor vehicle excise and we're putting down 1.8, they're going to want written documentation showing how we get that extra 200,000, or they won't approve the recap sheet.
Do we have that written documentation here?
Depends on which line item I'm putting it in. So let's say, for example, we have a contract with Easthampton for ambulance services. Thank you. Ambulance services. So, and it's not part of the revenue for 2026 actuals. I can upload a document to the, I can upload the document onto the gateway for page 3 and say, this is where I'm saying that I have $150,000 coming from. It's not $150,000, I'm just making up the number here, but let's hypothetically $150,000 is part of this contract and we will be getting it for the next 3 years and they will accommodate that.
Okay, but it sounds like for some of these, we might not have a number like that. So are we worried at all that the DOR won't accept some of this?
So the no override one, we need 1.16 million between May 2nd week to June 30th. And then there will be adjustments. So it's a very close call right now with the no override estimates for the local receipts. It's a very close call.
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying is that if we have a lot of local receipts in the next month and 4 days, then we would be able to say, hey, this is 100% and the DOR will accept that. But if we don't hit that, then we are going to actually have to reduce this item and make further cuts.
Yes.
So I guess what you're saying is that everybody should go out to a bunch of restaurants and also get a bunch of parking tickets between.
Parking ticket is not parking.
Oh, really?
Yes, but meals is, but, so the third quarter state revenues are not in. That's the big chunk of the money which is missing, which is gonna come in June. There are, what is the pilot payments? There are a couple pilot payments which also comes, in month of, June, which is big ticket items. So, Medicare or Medicaid money is gonna come. The ambulance receipts for 2 months is gonna come in. So there are some big ticket items which, though I don't feel 100% confident that it is gonna be there and it's gonna, like, I can say that it's gonna be a very close call. But then truing up, like, there's also discussion about, enterprise chargeback renegotiation. There's also discussion going on with Williston contract with our strategic partnership, which we are calling. If that gets approved by June 30th, or even by like November when I'm doing the tax rate recap, I can show them that this is the contract we have, and I'm anticipating that this money is going to be here for this fiscal year, and they might allow us. But as I said, the no override is not at all conservative. Every number is a little elevated in this calculation.
Okay. Anybody else online? All right. Okay, I think that's it for revenue. So just a couple points of just process before we adjourn. I know that there had been some talk right before the meeting started about potentially wanting to take a look at the timeline. Do you want to talk about that now? Sure, okay. Who wants to start? Evan, you were the one who brought it up, so.
Yeah,
I'm trying to understand what the
rationale around.
Yeah, what it is and what would be the logical adjustments.
Yeah, so I believe we're talking about a 2-week push from the first, so therefore instead of, because the full city council isn't voting until the 17th. So we could do the Monday before the 15th. That way we only have to do it on one of the budgets because we'll know the results of the override already. And also as far as the list of amendments that need to be made to the budget, it will allow all that to get done. Plus, I mean, that may come out of tomorrow's meeting as well from those numbers.
Okay, I see the logic there. I guess the one thing about it was I think that if.
And for instance, on the revenue side, as we were talking about that tonight, at that point, there should have been the BPW meeting. So then finance committee will have a look at the revenue before it's just the public hearing too as well.
Sure. I think. All right, councilors, any thoughts on that? I have just a.
I mean, to me, it makes sense because I think there's unknowns, and so we're voting on budgets that actually aren't finalized. And so to me, it just makes more sense to be able to have a better idea of a little bit more accurate numbers. And also, I think that we can on Monday begin to go through and begin to make amendments and have conversations. I just don't think it's a one night, one day kind of thing. I think we can still meet on Monday, begin to talk about kind of what we're seeing, and then begin to make some amendments, and then get to a point of, okay, now we have more clarity, and this is what we're gonna do. Also, we still have some other things we haven't finished yet that from the unclassified, so we're gonna have to, build that in as well. So that's just where I'm at.
Okay. Councilor Schmidt.
I appreciate that point. I think the thing that I was feeling concerned about was making sure we had enough time to deliberate and really, have the conversations you've mentioned about potential adjustments to the budget. And so as long as I like the idea of having the meeting on Monday still, even if it means we delay the actual vote and recommendation. I think that sounds really valuable.
Okay. I hear what everyone's saying. I think I'm okay moving forward with this. I just want to I guess maybe the one area of a little bit of discomfort that I have is just that to some extent, I think that even though the recommendation coming out of this committee is merely a recommendation, that any amendments that we make might be interesting to voters as they're making a decision. And so the idea of some of that conversation occurring after the override vote does certainly save us the trouble of amending two budgets, and that is nice. I just think that you do run into a problem where, like, if we were to say, hey, we actually want to do this. I mean, again, it's all non-binding anyway, because we can send something to the council and they can completely change it. I just thought that concluding this process prior to the override vote would send a certain amount of confidence to the voters. That's, I guess, my one thing. But
yeah, I think on Monday I have a lot of amendments that I want to make come Monday. And I'd like to begin to have that conversation so voters can actually see the direction and the things that we're thinking about, and then be able to. And obviously, there's a bunch of counselors who are here also, right, and online. So I think there's lots of opportunity to be able for there to be a general sense of the direction that at least this committee is going. Obviously, other counselors can't deliberate on that, but they will be able to share their opinions with voters beyond that. So they would, at least residents would have an idea of the direction perhaps that we are going in. But
okay,
that's my process.
I would just request that by either now or by tomorrow at some point to let me know so I can for Monday what department heads you would like, so I can make sure to timely invite them. So if they need to move things around a little, doesn't have to be right now. If any email would be more than plentiful on that.
Sure. Yeah, let's.
If you do want them at the present.
When we wrap up tomorrow, we can make our final requests for who we need to come back. I can say that that meeting where we talked about unclassified, it ran so long that we got partway through and then we turned to a new business item, and so we're going to have to finish that up.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
But I think let's try and have tomorrow have our lists of people that we have further questions for ready. But I think probably everyone should try and keep the department heads should probably all try and keep their schedules free if possible for that day.
I will reach out to them accordingly.
And I'll speak to that. We obviously haven't met with all of them, but I can just see based on a trend of what's been happening or being offered in other departments that I can say, well, that's probably also something that's likely to be amended, right?
And then also for that, if it is going to be all of them, I will also talk to Marianne about having this room be for that, as well as seeing as.
That seems smart. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I guess the only question I have then is, there was, if I recall correctly, do we want to touch on one of those appropriations before we wrap, or do you think we should do that on Monday or something?
Was there one that's pressing? I can't remember.
There was one around, yes, it was the election.
Oh, I think we have to do that.
Yeah. So I guess let's just. I left my. I've got it here. Yeah, that was my recollection. Is that the $16,000?
I'm talking about something here. The actual, that's, I think, my bar.
But So, Mary Derby, do you want to speak to, this is the one that we need to get done by the next meeting, right?
Yep. So just the 16,000 for elections?
Mm-hmm. And it's from free cash, right?
Free cash.
So.
And Hadel has the paperwork if we.
Yeah, I could use the paper.
You want to share it with you?
I have it all, but it's in my box downstairs. Yeah, okay. So $16,000. Just, I keep complaining about this, but I'm gonna keep complaining about it. When these things just say like account number, blah, 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 then it's hard for me to do the actual readings, but we're not doing that today. But that's free cash, right? 3590?
Yes.
Okay. So it's free cash, 11,500 for election workers, 4,500 for computer services to cover the cost of the special city election. I think we have to do this. I mean, we're quite committed to this path at this point. I don't think it'd be pretty weird for us to be like, yeah, let's not have the election. And elections cost money. So, is there any questions that anyone has about?
My only question is that the expenses that were broken down by the clerk, I think they just go a little bit further than what the sheet says. And so I just want to make sure that when I make a vote, I'm understanding how those two align. That's what I do have.
Yep.
But it was this other sheet that
This
has.
is from our packet.
Oh, okay.
So this, I think, was an estimate.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
And now today she's given us a actual breakdown, so.
Which is a little bit lower, but
Yeah.
it probably doesn't hurt to have a little bit of extra
Extra.
in case something weird happens.
Mhm.
So I would entertain a motion to approve this appropriation for the full council.
Of $16,000?
Yeah.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor? Aye. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.